According to Roy Baumeister, choices are at the heart of the self. They connect our inner desires to our outer actions, and they're one of the clearest ways the self functions as an agent in the social world. Go back to the beginning here just so you can see we are at Chapter 4, Choices and Actions, the Self in Control. Choices are where psychology, freedom, and responsibility meet. Every choice reflects our values and goals. Choices allow humans to shape their lives rather than just react to the environment. But choices also bring burdens, regret, responsibility, and decision fatigue. Baumeister stresses, to understand the self, we must understand how people make choices. Why do people sometimes avoid choosing altogether? Baumeister reminds us that while choice gives freedom, it also creates responsibility, effort, and risk. That's why people often resist making choices, even when it might be good for them. Psychologists use the term decision avoidance to describe strategies people use to postpone or sidestep choices. Some common examples are deferring, I'll decide later, defaulting, going with the option that requires no action, or delegating, letting someone else decide. One of the biggest reasons people avoid choices is fear of regret. Every choice means giving up alternatives. It also could be choice overload. The paradox of choice also explains avoidance. When faced with too many options, people feel overwhelmed. Reactance theory was proposed by Jack Brem in 1966. The basic principle: when people perceive that their freedom to choose is being restricted, they experience an unpleasant motivational state called psychological reactance. This reactance motivates them to restore their freedom, often by doing the very thing they were told not to do. An everyday example is teenagers told not to date someone, they want to date that person even more. Baumeister emphasizes that the self doesn't just maintain continuity, it also allows transformation. Humans are unique in their ability to reflect, make choices, and deliberately change course. The self has two sides, stability and flexibility. The freedom to change comes from the agent self, the part that makes decisions, regulates impulses, and pursues new goals. Change is central to human psychology because environments change, social roles change, personal growth requires adjusting values, beliefs, and behaviors. Of course, freedom to change doesn't mean change is easy. Baumeister highlights obstacles, habits, self-concept, stability, and social expectations. Baumeister reminds us that the self is more than a thinker or dreamer. It's a doer. The agent self exists so we can translate goals and values into real behavior. Freedom of action means having the capacity to act on your own will. It's different from freedom of thought, what we imagine, or freedom of choice, what we decide. It's about execution, actually carrying out the decision. Example, you might choose to start exercising, but freedom of action is what allows you to walk into the gym, lift weights, and stick with the plan. Baumeister breaks down the agent self as the executor of action. It organizes behavior to match goals. It exerts self-control to resist distractions. It negotiates between personal desires and social constraints. Baumeister argues that goals are the bridge between who we are and what we become. They turn vague desires into concrete action. Goals give life structure and direction. Without goals, behavior would be reactive, guided only by impulses. With goals, behavior becomes purposeful, your work today for a future reward. Goals are central to self-regulation. They provide standards against which we measure ourselves. He breaks it goal pursuit into two steps: setting goals and pursuing goals. Mindset and goals are tightly linked. Goals give the self-direction, but the mindset determines how people pursue them, whether they stay motivated, persist through obstacles, or give up. A mindset is the lens through which we interpret challenges, effort, and progress. It guides attention, it shapes motivation, it influences persistence. Fixed versus growth mindset. Fixed mindset are the abilities are seen as unchangeable. Growth mindset, abilities are seen as developable. Implementation mindset versus deliberate mindset. Deliberative mindset is weighing options before committing to a goal. Implementation mindset, locked in focus on execution once the goal is chosen. Baumeister points out that goals are central to human psychology because they give direction, order, and meaning to life. Without them, our behavior would be scattered and reactive. With them, our behavior becomes structured and purposeful. Goals are more than wishes. They're commitments to action. They provide standards. They supply motivation. And they create meaning. An example, if your goal is to graduate college, everyday actions, attending class, studying, writing papers, all make sense in relation to that bigger goal. Baumeister explains that goals involve two distinct stages: goal setting, choosing what to pursue. It's influenced by values, social expectations, opportunities, and personal desires. It can be long-term or short-term. The best goals are specific, realistic, and connected to meaning. Second part is goal pursuit, regulating behavior to move toward the goal. Requires planning, monitoring, and self-control. Involves resisting distractions and balancing competing goals. It's not enough to set goals. The challenge lies in following through. Baumeister emphasizes that self-regulation is one of the self's most essential tools. It lets us resist impulses, pursue goals, and live according to values. But here's the twist. Self-regulation is limited, and habits are the brain's shortcut to make life easier. He defines self-regulation as the process of controlling thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in order to reach goals. It allows us to delay gratification. It enables goal pursuit despite distractions. It helps us live up to standards and morals. For example, you resist eating junk food because you're pursuing the goal of staying healthy. The tote model was introduced by Miller, Galanter, and Pribram in 1960 as an alternative to simple stimulus response psychology. Instead of reacting automatically, humans compare their behavior to standards and goals, then adjust until the standard is met. Baumeister uses this to illustrate self-regulation in action. Test: compare the current state to the desired standard. Operate: take action to reduce the gap between current state and goal. And then test and test again. Recheck progress against the standard. Exit once the standard is met, stop operating. This cycle repeats constantly, and from simple tasks like adjusting posture to big goals like studying until your exam ready. The tote model reveals several key features of self-regulation. Standards matter. Goals and rules provide the target for testing. Feedback loops. Behavior is monitored continuously. Stopping rules. We stop acting once the standard is met. Conserving energy. Baumeister notes that this explains why self-regulation feels effortful. It requires constant monitoring and adjustment. Baumeister reminds us that self-regulation is at the core of human psychology. It's how we resist temptation, pursue goals, and live by values. Without it, society itself would fall apart. Habits are learned automatic responses to cues in the environment. They're triggered by context. They operate with little conscious thought. They save energy by reducing the need for deliberate decision making. Example, brushing your teeth before bed. You don't debate it every night, you just do it. Habits develop through repetition and reinforcement. At first, self-regulation is required. Over time, the behavior becomes linked to cues in your environment. Eventually, the habit runs automatically. Baumeister reminds us that while humans are capable of discipline and foresight, we're also prone to errors, impulses, and choices that undermine our own well-being. Irrationality means acting in ways that don't align with logic, evidence, or long-term benefit, making decisions based on emotion instead of reason, overestimating small risks, underestimating big ones, clinging to superstitions, biases, or wishful thinking. Several psychological forces drive irrationality. Emotions overpower logic, cognitive biases, short-term focus, social pressures. Self-destruction goes beyond irrationality. It's when behavior actively harms the self. Baumeister identifies different forms: self-defeating choices, self-handicapping, direct self-harm. Baumeister's key insight is that self-destruction often comes from trade-offs, not pure self-hatred. People pursue immediate relief. Self-handicapping protects the ego, even if it damages performance. And impulsivity overrides rational planning. Every choice we make involves giving something up. We can't have it all. So the self constantly negotiates between competing desires, values, and goals. A trade-off means sacrificing one good thing to gain another. Baumeister argues that trade-offs are at the heart of selfhood. They force the self to regulate, prioritize, and sometimes compromise. Self-control is essentially about trade-offs, choosing long-term rewards over short-term pleasure, resisting dessert today for health tomorrow, working hard now to enjoy success later. Last thought, trade-offs also shape relationships. Honesty versus kindness. Do I tell the harsh truth or protect someone's feelings? Individual goals versus group harmony. Autonomy versus belonging. We want independence, but we also crave acceptance. Culture often sets the rules. Baumeister frames suicide as the ultimate breakdown of self-regulation. The self normally protects life and plans for the future. In suicide, the self becomes convinced that ending life is the only way to escape pain, shame, or hopelessness. It reflects a trade-off, ending life to stop suffering, even at the cost of everything else. He identifies several themes: escape from self, burden of freedom, failure of self-regulation. Baumeister emphasizes that suicide often comes from distorted thinking, not clear logic. Short-term relief and long-term possibilities are undervalued. It reminds us of the importance of belonging, balance, and support. If the self is what gives us freedom and direction, then it also needs connection and guidance to carry that freedom safely. See you next time with Chapter 5.